All right, so today we are diving deep into DC Comics.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, should be a good one.
Yeah.
We got this analysis someone sent in. It's called A Historical Lens on Gender Representation in DC Comics. And basically, they wanted to know more about what it says about how female characters and their roles have changed over time in DC Comics. And it's really interesting stuff because it's not just about, superheroes and comics. It actually reflects a lot of changes in society, too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a really fascinating way to kind of see how our culture has changed. If you look at all the different eras of DC Comics from like the Golden Age all the way up to today, you can see how women were viewed differently at different times.
That's really cool.
In the data skies we take our flight. Trends and numbers come to life. Colors and charts, they dance and play. Showing truth in a visual way. In GenderDecoded we uncover truths and stories like no other. In the data waves we find the secret maps of humankind.
And we've got some excerpts here from A Historical Lens on Gender Representation in DC Comics.
Really gets into how portrayals have changed or haven't changed, as the case may be.
Right, and what that says about social norms and how they've shifted alongside those representations in the comics.
Exactly. Like, what does it tell us about the world outside of comics?
For sure.
And we're talking about all the way from the Golden Age to today.
Yeah, it's kind of wild when you think about it. Like, even iconic characters, Batgirl and Supergirl, they were originally introduced as well.
Just counterparts to the guys.
Right, just counterparts. So we're going to unpack what that means and how things have, hopefully started to shift.
Should be a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, so let's rewind all the way back
to the beginning.
To the golden age of comics, 1930s, 40s.
The birth of the superhero.
This is where we got Superman, Batman, the Flash.
Setting the stage for the whole genre.
The big guns.
But where were the women?
Right, that's the question.
It was a very different time.
Yeah, traditional gender roles were...
very much the norm.
Yeah.
And comics definitely reflected that.
So you wouldn't see a lot of female characters?
No, not a lot. And when you did...
They were pretty sidelined.
Side characters, love interests, damsels in distress.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Right.
But there was Wonder Woman.
Ah, yes, Wonder Woman.
Right, and she was a golden age character, too.
Absolutely. 1941.
So how does she fit into all this?
She was a game changer, a total game changer. Here you have this powerful, independent female superhero.
Going toe-to-toe with the big guys.
Exactly. She was such a departure from the norm, She showed everybody that women could be these captivating, compelling heroes.
Yeah, it seems pretty bold for DC to introduce a character like that back then.
Oh, it definitely was. But you have to remember... World War II was going on.
Oh, right.
And women were taking on these roles traditionally held by men.
Filling in the gaps.
Exactly. And so even though her creators might not have intended it...
She became a symbol.
A symbol of female empowerment.
That's interesting, but were there people who pushed back?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There were critics. They saw her as a threat to traditional values.
Wow, it makes sense for the time, but still.
It's a really fascinating dynamic.
Yeah, it is. So moving on to the Silver Age.
The mid-20th century.
Superheroes are back in the spotlight.
Big-time resurgence in popularity.
Did things change for women in this era?
Well, not as much as you might hope. There were some awesome female characters.
Yeah, Batgirl, Supergirl.
Right, but there's a pattern here.
What do you mean?
They were often introduced as counterparts to the existing male heroes.
So still revolving around the men.
Yeah, still in their shadow in a lot of ways.
Huh. Do you think that was just a product of the times?
I think it's a bit of both, It was still a time where those social norms really favored men.
Right, yeah.
But it also, I think, reflects an uncertainty.
About what?
About whether a female character could carry a title,
On her own 2 feet.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, so let's fast forward a bit more.
80s and 90s.
The modern age. Big shifts happening in the world.
Absolutely, a time of change.
Did that make its way into comics?
Oh, definitely. This era saw the rise of characters like Harley Quinn and Starfire.
More depth, More personality.
Right, and their own storylines independent of the guys. They had their own ambitions, flaws, motivations.
You can really see how movements like feminism were starting to have an impact.
Absolutely. Challenging those traditional gender roles and pushing for greater representation in all parts of society, media included.
So comics were starting to reflect that change.
Absolutely, showing women as more than just love interests or damsels in distress.
That's good. But even with those changes, male characters still dominated, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. Even in the modern age, they made up something like 70% of new introductions.
Oh.
And if you look at the team composition...
Like the Justice League?
Yeah, Justice League, Teen Titans, a lot of them were all male.
Or maybe just one woman?
Right, the token female member.
So even when there were more women, they were still...
Kind of on the sidelines.
It shows how far things still had to go.
Yeah, progress was being made, but it was slow.
Okay, so let's jump to the present.
The 21st century.
How's DC doing in terms of representing women today?
Well, from the 2000s to now, there's been a conscious effort.
A conscious effort to do what?
To embrace diversity and inclusion.
Okay.
And that's definitely reflected in their characters.
Can you give me some examples?
Sure, we see characters like Jessica Cruz becoming a Green Lantern.
Oh, right.
And Batwoman's been reimagined as an openly lesbian character.
Breaking down stereotypes.
Exactly, bringing new perspectives to the DC universe.
So reflecting the diversity of the real world.
Precisely. And it goes beyond just, adding more women. It's about the types of female characters.
And the stories that are being told.
Exactly. And who gets to be the hero? It goes beyond just gender, too, right? There's more characters of color, characters with disabilities.
Representing different points on the LGBTQ plus spectrum.
Right. Everyone deserves to see themselves in these stories.
I mean, that makes sense. But are men still the majority?
Yeah, they still are. It's hard to change decades of male-dominated storytelling overnight.
I can imagine.
But there's something else the article brings up that I think is really interesting.
What's that?
The names of female characters.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's a small detail, but it says a lot.
Like what?
Well, think about it. Supergirl, Batgirl, One Girl.
Yeah.
Those names, while iconic, also suggest that they're somehow lesser.
Oh, I see what you mean.
They're perpetually junior, regardless of their powers, accomplishments,
Yeah, like a constant reminder that it's still a boys' club.
Exactly. It's not just about who gets to be a hero. It's how they're portrayed.
And what their name implies.
Exactly.
It's subtle.
But it's powerful.
Okay, what about team dynamics? Because even today, it seems like female-led teams are still pretty rare.
You're right. This source actually says almost a third of teams in the DC universe have no women at all.
Really? A third?
Yeah. And when women do form teams, they're often in these segregated groups.
So separate from the main action.
It reinforces the idea that they can only thrive in their own space rather than being fully integrated.
Huh. It's fascinating, to see how these trends have played out over time.
Definitely.
We've seen a shift in how women are represented, but like you said, there's still work to do.
For sure.
Makes you wonder, what does the future hold for gender representation in comics?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, will we see more women leading teams?
Will they get to be as complex and flawed as their male counterparts?
Will we finally lose the girl suffix?
So many questions. I guess time will tell.
Time will tell.
What about you listening? What stood out to you in this conversation? Have you noticed other examples of changing representation?
In comics, in other media, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
And with that, we're going to wrap up this deep dive.
Until next time.
See you then.